Welcome back to the series that is all about Jesus. We've been diving into the Gospel of Mark. Hopefully you've taken some time to read through Mark chapter 4, verse 1 through 34 today. I know it's a lot of reading. It's going to be a lot to unpack, so I hope you've taken some time to get in the Word before you're listening to this morning. So far in the book of Mark, we've learned a lot. We've learned a lot about who Jesus is. We've learned a lot about his central purpose, to teach about the kingdom. The kingdom has arrived. He is the king, and this is good news for us, for we can receive what he's done in our place. The question that's come has been, who is going to be in the kingdom? That certainly applies to today's message. Who is going to be in the kingdom? This question has been front and center, and ultimately the answer has been, so far, it's the people that have been given the grace, all right, to both hear, okay, then to repent and believe, and ultimately to follow Jesus and his will as their king. Now, this is consistent with what the rest of the New Testament teaches about salvation. There's a very popular passage in the book of Ephesians chapter 2, verses 8 through 10, that I think goes directly with this. Why don't you take a look at it with me today? Let's check it out. It says this in verse 8, 9, and 10 of Ephesians chapter 2. For by grace you have been saved, through faith. And this is not your own doing. It is the gift of God, not the result of works, so that no one may boast. In other words, Jesus has accomplished your salvation for you. Jesus has gifted this to you. All right, and you receive it as a gift of grace. You didn't earn it. It says this, for we are then, okay, we not boast about it, for we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus. Okay, Jesus has created us. Why? For good works. Okay, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. In other words, we are saved, all right, by his grace through our that we have now a faith in Jesus Christ. But this faith is meant to have fruit in our life. This faith has an impact in how we walk, ultimately in who we follow. We are saved not just to have an understanding in our head, but a heart transformation which leads to a life transformation. Indeed, this is the idea of belief all throughout the Old Testament and New Testament. You see, belief was never just some theological understanding without practical implications on your relationship with God, a relationship to God, and ultimately what you did for God. That was never to be seen as separate from believing. Just like it's never been about accepting a religious creed without an internal transformation by the work of the Spirit in the life of the believer. There's certainly a trend out there that's all about the head. That's what it means to believe. No, but Jesus is asking you to not just believe in your head, but to believe in your heart. He's always wanted the heart, because Jesus knows when he gets your heart and your heart's desire is captured by him, then he knows he has the person's life and they will be forever changed. Jesus is after the inner man, that he might see a transformation in the outer man. This is who ultimately gets to be in the kingdom, that gets the grace of God that has not just impacted the head, but has transformed the heart and the power of the Spirit. All right, with this in mind, let's jump into Mark chapter 4, which hopefully you just read. And in there, you'll see that we've got Mark recording a central observation about Jesus' parables. And then there's three very related kingdom parables, and ultimately there's one central parable in this particular passage. So let's examine this text by breaking it down into these sections. First is the central observation that hopefully you've picked up. Maybe it was shocking to you as you read through Mark chapter 4, that not everyone was going to, or even was meant to hear, accept, and respond to Jesus' words about the kingdom. Not everyone was going to get the parables that he is sharing. In fact, weren't meant to get all of the parables, and especially the ones that are related to this. We see here the lamp and the basket parable. The idea here is that if you actually are one that hears it, if you actually get this kingdom message, then that is a privilege, and a privilege that you ought to act on, that you ought to use. You have come to have light to your eyes, so be a person that leans into that and ultimately uses that. And as you use it, you'll understand even more and more about the kingdom. Then there's this other parable, this mystery of how the seed grows, kind of a parable that suggests that it's a bit of a mystery how and why and when someone actually comes to get it. Like, who's going to get it? How did they get it? How are they prepared to get it? Ultimately, this is suggesting as we share the gospel, the Spirit moves and unveils who, when, where, and how he does it. He just kind of does as he does. And with time, as he's doing this, as the kingdom, as message is out there, and as he allows it to take root in different places, eventually this will grow in its own mysterious way, in its own mysterious time, until eventually the harvest comes. The kingdom arrives. The final judgment comes. This is the image actually from Joel chapter 3, verse 13. It's a bit of a mystery how and when and where the growth comes. But ultimately, as we're faithful, God brings the growth. And then you have this third of these parables. It's a maybe more popular one you maybe heard before. I know I heard it in Sunday school. It confused me a lot when I was a kid. The mustard seed parable. And here we see that the mustard seed, this tiny seed that would often maybe get in the mix with other seed that was used in the farmer's field. All of a sudden you got this big tree that's sticking up out of the field, bigger than all the rest of the things that he's seeking to harvest. And that tree can get up to like 10 feet tall in different places. All right, this is but it all started with this mustard seed. And Jesus is saying here that he is content with a small number that are hearing, that are understanding, and ultimately that are responding to this news of the kingdom. Why? Like, Jesus is here. In his 3-year ministry, how is he content with just a few that are understanding? He's content with this small number precisely because he knows that he is starting a multiplication mission. He's not planting a huge seed. He's planting a small seed that will grow in a huge way. This movement may start small, and it's meant to take root in just a few, but ultimately it's going to grow and expand to the ends of the earth. It starts in one heart, it goes to the next heart, and it multiplies to the next heart until it reaches the world. Dan Spader has a great quote with reference to this. It's actually one of Dave Lane's favorite illustrations. The suggestion is that if you were to every single day, okay, I want you to imagine this, you every single day are like this powerhouse preacher, all right? You go and you convert 1,000 people to Jesus Christ every single day. Now that would be like, boom, that's like Billy Graham on steroids, all right? This is like, whoa, this person is reaching 1,000 people for Jesus a day. What an accomplishment, right? Everybody be patting that person on the back. No doubt this is transforming a lot of people's hearts. It's a beautiful thing that's happening. However, if you were to do that, okay, for every day, 1,000 people, it would take you 20,000 years. Listen, 20,000 years to reach the entire world. Okay, that's a lot of lifetimes for one person reaching 1,000 people. All right, you can even replicate yourself over and over. And in that vein, it still would take 20,000 years. 20,000 years to reach the world. But then, if you, again, just took this year to invest in somebody, to tell them about Jesus Christ. They come to Jesus Christ. And then you grow them in Jesus Christ. And you ultimately get them to the place where they're ready to do the same thing with another person next year. They're going to tell them about Jesus. They're going to reproduce themselves in that person. And ultimately that person is going to be ready to tell another person about Jesus. If you did that, all right, this year, you did it with one person. And that person was doing it with you next year. And ultimately that multiplication process continued. It would only take, listen to this, it would only take you in that situation 33 and a half years to reach the entire world. You heard me right, 33 and a half years. You could reach 1,000 people a day, and it'd take you 20,000 years. You reach one person a year. A year. All right? And they did the same. And then they did the same. And then they did the same. You'd reach the entire world's population in 33 and a half years. Right? Well, then comes the question. What is the church focusing on? Indeed, what are you focusing on? Is it about a quantity? Or is it about a quality? Is it about massive numbers of addition? Or is it about a mission of multiplication? Jesus is saying he started with a mustard seed. He started a multiplication mission. He had 3 years. And he knew if he could reach 1,000 people a day for 3 years. He wouldn't make a dent. But if he planted this seed in the hearts of a few, and they did the same, ultimately it would reach the ends of the earth. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's ultimately why the parables. It's ultimately why he proclaimed the kingdom the way that he did. And it's ultimately why he spent so much time on just a few. But now on to the central parable. I call it a central parable. It's the parable of the sower. I think maybe better named the parable of the soils. Because this is a parable that comes up in Matthew and Mark and in Luke, called the Synoptic Gospels. It comes up in each of them, but it doesn't just come up in each of them. It is actually taken, there's time and valuable space on expensive paper back in the day to explain this particular parable. In fact, if you consider that Mark is a really short, it's like a fast forward account of Jesus' life, he takes a lot of time on this particular parable because it is so central to Jesus' ministry. Now, a short explanation here, a simple explanation is this. In the parable, there are 4 heart reactions to the news of the kingdom. All right? There's 4 heart reactions that you can anticipate when you share the gospel with people. There's the pathway reaction, or the pathway heart. I would refer to this person like a hardened Henry. All right? They are rejecting the gospel outright. Or at minimum, they just aren't able to get it. Perhaps it's because that hardened Henry has been hardened by sin, or maybe a particular philosophy, or maybe just a lie that already exists in the heart that Satan has planted there before. Ultimately, this person outright rejects the news from Jesus. Then there's the rocky soil heart. I would refer to this as Shallow Sally's heart, all right? Shallow Sally, she likes Jesus' gospel. Maybe she even agrees with it philosophically, but there's no root in her. There's no root in her heart. And so she's not willing to suffer or to be rejected for holding to that truth when it gets difficult to hold to it. She believes it in her head, but it's never taken root in her heart. She's not willing to suffer for that news. Then there's the weedy soil, or the weedy heart. A conflicted heart, a divided heart. I refer to this as the conflicted Courtney. It's like Courtney believes in the kingdom and the word about the kingdom, all right? She believes it, but just not enough to give up her earthly stuff. Just not enough to put aside the other cares of the world. Just not enough to make it her treasure. Ultimately, Jesus, her lone treasure. And really, the problem is that conflicted Courtney wants the best of both worlds. She kind of ends up being like a fence sitter. She doesn't go all in because she's still wanting a little bit of this world and a little bit of Jesus. And ultimately, this results in her being choked out by those weeds, by those other desires, and results in her being unfruitful for the kingdom. And then you've got the good heart, or the good soil. I refer to this type of person as the all-in person, the all-in Alfred, if you will. All right? All-in Alfred hears it. All right? He hears it. And then he doesn't just hear it, he accepts it. This word means he admits to it. He takes it near. He delights in it. He acknowledges it as his own. It gets down deep in his heart. And so Alfred ultimately dies to himself. He grows and he then distributes this word to others. He multiplies in this world. At the end of this parable, then, leaves everybody with a question in their heart if they understand it. Which one am I? Indeed, which one are you? Are you a hardened Henry that outright rejects the news from Jesus? Maybe you think it sounds dumb or ridiculous, or maybe you think it doesn't make sense to you or anyone else that's as smart as you. Or maybe you don't like this news because it means that you'll have to give up control, or you'll have to give up the thing that you want. And so you're not interested. Not interested in that kind of a sacrifice. Or maybe you're not a hardened Henry, maybe you're a shallow Sally. Maybe you're a person that when it gets tough is going to fold under the pressure because there's no root in your heart. This means when people start to make fun of you at work, or make fun of maybe Jesus at work, you don't say anything. Or when the government starts to outlaw Jesus and sharing his word as it's written, then you kind of are willing to compromise on this idea of I'm a Christian. Or maybe when it's socially unacceptable to be a Christian or hold to clear biblical teachings, instead of clinging to those things, you're willing to drop them. You're willing to compromise on those truths. Maybe that's not describing you yet. Maybe you're a conflicted Courtney. You're a person that wants Jesus, okay? You see him, but you want a little something else on the side too. You have this divided heart. So, I like Jesus, but I don't know if I'm willing to give up my money, my control, my security, my me life. I like Jesus, but I'm not willing to give up that particular pleasurable sin, that pet sin. I want Jesus and this over here. Maybe I'll even convince myself it's okay. Or I want Jesus, but I also want my respected position. I want my success in the community and maybe in my company. I want Jesus, but I really want my acceptance from friends, family, or the culture. And so I want Jesus, but I really want their acceptance too. Maybe you're like none of those. Maybe by God's grace, you're an all-in Alfred. Ask yourself the question, does it ring true to you that Jesus plus nothing is everything that you want? That's what your heart desires. And because of that, you're willing to die to me for my King. And because of that, I'm willing to get uncomfortable to multiply and ultimately expand his kingdom. Maybe you're saying, yes, I'm willing to lose it all for this kingdom call. I am willing to suffer to proclaim his salvation and glory, no matter what the cost. See, friends, you can tell which soil, which heart you are by how you respond to the kingdom message, what you do with it. It's going to show up in your calendar. So thinking about what you give your time to, is your time mostly devoted to me or he? Think about it from the standpoint of how you use your gifts, how you use your skill sets. Is it about me, or do I use it for he? What about how does your bank statement look? Does it suggest that you're about his kingdom or this kingdom? Is he the priority, or am I still the priority? So basically, when it boils down to, after you kind of come to know this parable that Jesus is speaking about the kingdom and which heart ultimately gets it and does something about it, which heart soil do you want to be? What heart desire do you have? What fruit do you see in your life? Are you an all-in Alfred? Are you all in for this kingdom that Jesus is establishing? Are you living like he's the king? Are you following him? Are you going to be a multiplier too? Let me wrap this up with just this statement. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. Hear. And may God grant you the grace to accept it deep within your heart and then go do something about it. Watch that seed grow and then multiply that seed in your life. God be with you as you go. May you have the privilege of seeing him expand his kingdom through you.